Welcome to the inaugural episode of my latest podcast, Fox on Podcasting. In this first episode, I visit with University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill PreMed student Joseph Ayinde on his podcast, PreMed More Than a Major. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and we're going to take things in a little bit different direction today. First of all, I believe this is the first brother Sigma Chi I have ever had on a podcast. How about that? In hoc to all you SIGs out there. Number two, I'm talking to Joseph Ayinde. I met Joseph a couple of months ago now at Podcast Expo 2023 and fell in love with his story. He's doing some really cool things. And I asked him if he would take time to come on the pod, and he said yes. So Joseph, with that incredibly long-winded introduction, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thank you, Tom.
I guess you're in college. Where are you going to college and what are you studying?
Yeah, so I'm at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm majoring in biology, and I also have minors in neuroscience and entrepreneurship. So pre-med, trying to follow along that track, as I'll get into later, but also trying to delve into some different areas with entrepreneurship and neuroscience just to expand on my own interests a little bit.
So as I mentioned, we met at Podcast Expo 2023 in Orlando, and I wanted to ask, what was your experience there?
Yeah, so Podfest was really transformative for me because I hadn't really been in a professional environment before. Academic settings, I was very used to being in classes with older people, but being around older people in a sense where I had to represent my brand and who I was and what I was trying to portray was such a different environment. Honestly, I was pleasantly surprised because the environment was super welcoming. A perfect example is meeting you. So I was walking into the welcome ceremony and the keynote speaker was about to come on. And the gentleman sits to my right, introduces himself to me as Mr. Fox. And I'm okay, this guy's kind of cool. He has a lot to say. Let's see what he's about. And so literally 5 minutes later, I can't make this up, Mr. Fox, welcome to the stage. That's what the DJ had said. And so Mr. Fox goes up to the stage, starts elaborating about all the great work he's doing. And I'm blown away. I'm like, this is a firsthand observation and just opportunity that's been put in front of me. And it's a perfect example of what's to come with the conference in general. Just so many unexpected conversations, so many unexpected just connections. And honestly, it was much more than just a professional experience. It was honestly personal growth I saw as well. I saw myself being more comfortable talking to older individuals, being more comfortable just being around older individuals, and being more comfortable just expressing who I am as a person and what my brand portrays in general.
So there's two major podcast conferences in the United States each year, and Podfest Expo was in January. We just had Podcast Movement Evolutions in Las Vegas, and many of the people similar to you who are still in college found an experience similar to yours. And at Podfest Expo, one of the best descriptions I had was that they just said it's a big family and everybody's supporting each other. And that's what I really love about Podfest Expo. Podcast Movement is also great, but it's great in a different way. And you and I never would have met if it hadn't been for Podfest Expo and you plopping down at the table I was at. That was very cool. And that's what I love about podcast conferences in general, but Podfest Expo specifically is people I never would have met. And I'm exposed to new ideas and that I never would have heard of and new voices I never would have heard. I think it's really great for everyone as well, since you were at Podfest Expo and I now know you have a podcast. So tell us about your podcast. And what I'm really interested in is how did you weave all of these academic interests really into your podcast?
So originally back in around, say, December, November, school was getting out and I'm a super motivated guy, just always wanting to do more than what's on the table, trying to make the most out of it. And so I had in my mind, I was like, okay, I used to do creative writing. I really like to write, but also I really like to talk. So I want to find some type of method where I can get my message across, what I'm trying to convey, in a way that's still fun to me and something I'm passionate about because I want to keep it going and I want to create longevity and consistency. So I started just brainstorming and I was like, okay, what can I do to align my future career goals of being a doctor, being pre-med, with my passions of writing and just being on like a stage, like performing for people. And so this was like the perfect combination of those two things, because further before I had started a business idea, Healy, that we'll get to a little later. And that had sparked my interest in just going beyond what I had on paper in classes. So I was learning a lot of complex ideas, just came out of molecular biology and genetics, a very hard class where I learned a lot, but I was struggling to feel engaged with it. It wasn't really meaningful because I hadn't found a way to quite apply it in a way to make a difference. So decided to start a podcast, and I was like, okay, I can't be the only student with these frustrations. I can't be the only student that's feeling like things aren't meaningful or intentional, and they aren't feeling like they aren't getting what they deserve out of what they're learning, and they're not holding their true value. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take this first step. I'm going to start the podcast, Pre-Med More Than a Major. So the title itself gives away where we're headed with things, but Pre-Med More Than a Major, the idea behind it is to open conversation with pre-med majors about topics that would usually not be discussed. So it's a subsection of my company that I've started, Healy PreMed Reimagined. And the goal of the company in general is to allow each student to reimagine their pre-med journey, to be able to see it as their own. So not necessarily, okay, I want to fill this position. How can I get here? How can I get into this med school? More seeing it as, okay, I have these skills. What value can I bring to the table? Students need to see themselves as a valuable piece, because in the end, they are bringing value to the situation. They aren't the only ones that are. The companies and the hospitals and the different organizations aren't the only ones bringing value to the table. So I wanted to open the conversation about how students can really see themselves as that valuable piece in different ways they can incorporate that in their daily life. Because one thing that I also struggled with was, okay, it's all fine and dandy to want to apply these things every now and then at a service event every 2 weeks or a club event every month. But how can I apply this in my daily life? And how can I make pre-med not just a track, but a journey?
So I'm a lawyer by a professional background, and I've dealt with a lot of folks in the healthcare industry from the legal perspective, whether representing them in lawsuits, whether it's representing or writing contracts, et cetera. And I've also worked in the healthcare industry from the compliance perspective. And one of my observations about the healthcare industry, and that includes certainly physicians, but really every other part, administration, pharmacies, and you name any other part of the healthcare industry, is there's a real sense of a mission and delivering services and products to the greater community. And I think that was driven home to me most deepest. I interviewed this 10-year-old delivery guy for a very small pharmacy in a very small town. And he said, look, I'm taking drugs out to people who can't get to their front door. And no, I'm not a pharmacist. And no, I didn't go to college. And no, I didn't finish high school. I got a role to play. And my role is taking the medicine to the people who need it. And that really struck me, that sort of passion throughout the profession. Would that be consistent with what is a pre-med student?
Yeah, super consistent. Just passion driven by purpose. One thing that I find that's pretty consistent across the board with like pre-med or anyone in the medical profession is just a purpose that's beyond just like monetary gains or just like other surface level things, a purpose that's rooted deeper, a purpose that allows them to get past the daily wins and losses. So for your example, the pharmacist that was delivering drugs, or like the drug delivery person, just getting past those daily wins and losses of, oh, it might be hard to get up for work. Oh, it might be a little challenging to get these drugs to the door on a day where I'm tired or a day where I'm not feeling good. But the purpose stands above that. The purpose of helping others, that may be a personal family connection. Myself, my aunt has gastroparesis, so it's an incurable disease. She had a rough time with some pharmaceutical endeavors. And so that was one of my personal things. I feel like when it comes to medicine, there's always a personal attachment attached to the most passionate practitioners, because medicine's all around us. It's not absent from our daily lives. We all have an aunt, an uncle, a grandfather, or a grandmother that needed medical help at one time. And just being able to observe the system that we have in place and seeing the room for change, I feel like motivates a variety of professionals and physicians to just go that much harder in what they're doing. And it allows them to have that personal connection that allows them to really find meaning in what they're doing. And I'm a big believer that when you can find meaning in what you're doing, then you can do it a lot harder.
So you mentioned Healy. What is Healy and how does it relate to your podcast? Or does perhaps the better question is, how does your podcast fit in with what you're doing with Healy?
Yeah. So Healy is my business that I've co-founded with another pre-med student here at UNC, Leonardo Bennett. So over break, I was sitting down and I told you I kind of have meaning and intention to what I'm doing because I'm a very purpose-driven person. I want to know, okay, like I'm doing this for this reason. I may not know how it's going to work out, but I know like why I'm going to be doing it. So I was like, okay, I'm not really feeling like I'm having meaning. I'm not feeling intentional. So I'm going to start this company. And I want to serve as that middleman. I want to serve as the bandage. I want to heal this gap that I'm seeing. And the gap that I was seeing, students. So students have a variety of knowledge, whether it be, for instance, in my molecular biology class, I was learning the role of RNA and like transcription and translation and learning how different mistakes can be corrected with different technologies. And over break, an example of how I was applying that was I started investing. I downloaded an app called Plink, Investing for Beginners, and I started looking and researching biotech companies. My professor, Dr. Madsen, had taught us a bunch about biotech and how it was up and coming. So I decided to do a little bit of research, invest in 2 to 3 companies, and I wanted to see what would happen. Within 2 to 3 days, I saw honestly very large increases because these weren't companies where I just threw my money in. I'd done my scientific research, my background research, looked at articles, looked at the drugs they had in phase trials, and started just applying my knowledge in a way to make a difference. And so when that started, I started seeing some positivity from that. That was more confirmation that I was ready to expand this idea of applying and making a difference. So that's when I founded Healy. And I was like, okay, where do I want to begin with this? Because pre-med is such a niche area. It's a market that's already there, and I want to tap into it. So I decided to create the brand in hopes of just starting at UNC, it being small. We're going to have a couple events. Maybe the podcast idea started to come up, but it was very small at the beginning. I wasn't really thinking to scale. I wasn't really thinking about making it really honestly like a actual company. It may have just been a club at the beginning. So things progress, and I start talking to Leo, and we're like, okay, what do we want to do with this? What's our goal? And the goal we identified was we want students to find value in themselves. So our main motto is going to be for students and by students. So our business model, we wanted to build it to where students will be benefiting from it, but also we could also benefit students as well. So we started brainstorming, and we were like, okay, we're going to start with the podcast. So we're going to start with pre-med more than a major, because first we need to let people know what Healy is going to be about before we start doing events, before we start doing tangible things. So we started the podcast. We got our first couple episodes out, and we wanted to get ourselves on the map, let people know what we were about. And so first episode was every opportunity is an opportunity. So we started talking about how everything from a conversation like this to a big internship is an opportunity. And then second episode, we moved more into doubt to determination. So we're going to be moving more into, how do we face our fears? How do we find purpose in pre-med? So opening these conversations that most kids aren't having, but can bring true insight to where they're going in their lives and the journey they're trotting upon with pre-med. So that's the podcast side of things. That's how the podcast fits into Healy. But Healy overall is much more than the podcast. So to get more into it, we're having events later this semester to kickstart our tangible aspect of Healy. So we're having a Healy career fair later this month, March 31st. And at that career fair, we're going to have 15 to 20 individuals from different organizations, different professions within the medical realm. And they're going to come and talk to students. So we're going to have a DJ, a vendor. We're going to have different types of like visual things to make things look a lot better. We're going to have microphones to do interviews throughout. And one of the goals of the career fair is to create a really 1v1 personalized experience. It's representative of what we're the ideals and the culture we're trying to create at Healy, because we don't want it to be a situation where a professional hands a kid a flyer and it's join the listserv, we'll see you in 2 weeks, or we'll email you in a month. We want it to be a situation where the professional and the kid are dancing to music together, saying, okay, we're having a good time. Maybe we could go for coffee next week. Maybe we could go for a little Zoom, how we're doing, or Restream, or some type of online personal connection. We want students to find that connection, because we feel like in that connection, students will find their own value and students will see really what they're trying to do. That's how we want them to reimagine their journey. We don't want their journey to be filled with, oh, I want to fill this position, or, oh, I want this job. We want the journey to be, oh, I want to gain these skills so I can make this difference. Because as you said, the most passionate practitioners, the most passionate individuals in the medical realm are the ones who make the most of a difference. It's not the doctor who knows every little thing from the textbook. It's the doctor who can apply everything that they know in a way that is meaningful, in a way that is intentional. And so these are the things that we feel like if we cultivate at this young age by having this focus on these intangibles of the journey, not necessarily the destination, and not just having these ideas, but having events that apply these ideas in a real way. We feel is we're almost taking the first steps ourselves with the company. Healy as a whole, the idea behind it, applying your knowledge to make a difference, that's what I'm doing with the company itself. And so what I want to do over time is scale the company as I scale. So right now the company is for students, by students, but as I go professional, and my hopes, as I will get into later, I don't know, is to be a neurosurgeon. So as I scale professionally, as I go professional, I want to take the company professional. So one thing that I've thought about far down the road is Healy Health. So, you know, we have Cone Health, Novant Health, various health companies right now. I want to take Healy to the next level eventually. When I go professional, when I start practicing, I want Healy to become a whole company where it's Healy Health. We have Healy Hospitals, taking the brand international. And the way I'm going to do that is through my own journey. So right now, Healy is just an audio podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. You can find it on all those platforms. But we're going to hope to move to a video podcast on YouTube with our first event in March. And so one thing I haven't gotten to yet, and honestly haven't announced to anyone yet, is I will be studying abroad in Australia this summer with an internship. And so I'm going to be taking Healy abroad with me. So Healy is going to be going abroad. We're going to have Healy Australia and going to start taking the YouTube abroad with that. So things are in motion, moving fast. As Mr. Fox has said, being in school along with running the company has been a huge juggle, a huge balance, but it's honestly pushed me in both areas to be a lot more motivated and a lot more productive because I had that purpose that's outside of just the schoolwork. So really aligning that purpose, finding your purpose first is crucial in pre-med, I believe, because without a purpose, you're driven by other things. And when those other things wane, when those other things go, you go. So when you have a purpose that's bigger than yourself, you allow yourself to do things that are bigger than yourself. And so really honing that purpose, finding the things that align to your purpose. So the classes, the major, the volunteer opportunities, the internship. And this is why we say pre-med is much more than just a track or a major. Pre-med is a journey. It's first finding your purpose on the journey. Then it's exploring, finding out this purpose is really what you want to do. And then it's pushing full force with your passion to pursue that purpose. And that's what we're trying to encourage at Healy. We feel this is missing with this track or with this major right now. So we feel like adding a sense of meaning and intentionality to pre-med is something that is very needed, and that'll be super beneficial for both students and organizations and hospitals alike.
So Joseph, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but if our listeners wanted more information on yourself, on Healy, on your podcast, or really any of the things you have going on, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
On Instagram, we are located at Healy UNC. LinkedIn, we are Healy. If you go on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or iHeartRadio, our podcast is titled Pre-Med More Than a Major.
Are you on LinkedIn?
Yes, I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me Joseph Ayinde, Ayinde.
Joseph, I want to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
Thank you, Tom. It was great to see you.
This is Tom Fox again. I hope you enjoyed this first episode of my interesting, exciting, and fun new podcast, Fox on Podcasting. If you enjoyed this, I hope you will subscribe, rate, and review this podcast to help get the word out. Fox on Podcasting is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.